Hi, Brian.
Hey, Nicholas, great to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm going to do a short intro and can we get into it?
Sounds great.
All right. Welcome everyone. It's Today is Thursday, 11th of July. I'm Nick from Equities Tracker, and I will be speaking with Brian from Sentiment about the latest crypto update. Hi, Brian.
Hey, I'm excited to get into it. It's been a big week.
Yeah, all-time high today.
Yeah, we finally saw a second breach, kind of a couple of them over the last 24 hours, where we were stuck at that 112K all-time high from May 22nd. And before we knew it, we had just passed 112 and a half yesterday and got all the way up to about 115.5, or I'm sorry, 116.5 as of a couple hours ago for this recording.
Yeah, uh, it's morning here, so the moment I wake up, I saw that 116. That's that's something you don't see first time.
Agreed. And what's interesting, I mean, there's certainly talk about it, but it's a bit of a muted celebration compared to previous all-time highs. Like I do remember there being a little more hype and euphoria surrounding the 112K all-time high compared to this one. And I think it's a good sign overall. We want to see the crowd not too overly euphoric when it comes to some of these milestones. I think in this case, it's about how far we climb. Like if we go all the way to 120 Bitcoin, I think that starts to change the narrative and people really start to celebrate because it's significantly higher than the last all-time high. If we just barely squeak by it and then fall back down, people end up shrugging their shoulders. And we've seen a few teases of that. Even yesterday, we went above 112 and then we fell back to like 110. And people were like, I guess it was an all time high, but how much should I really care about this? So I think the true test will be how high can this Bitcoin rally go now? And at what point will the narrative start to change to euphoria and the media starts to catch on and tells everyone to buy? And that's usually where the top is.
That makes sense. Uh, but I guess that it's not the same as the past all-time highs. So this time around, everybody is a little bit more used to it.
Right.
Yeah. So what
Exactly.
does the on-chain metric says though? Because even all-time highs, a lot of people must be wondering whether should I get in, should I stay out?
Yeah, it's an interesting time right now. I'll share a few different things that we're keeping an eye on right now. For starters, this is just the 7-day run, and you can see several altcoins have actually been some of the big winners. Bitcoin's up here, currently up about 5.5% over the past week, but you can see Ton up over 77%. Black Phoenix has doubled. Uh, the Trump MAGA coin is up over 100%. So there's plenty of altcoin gains right now that are incredibly high compared to the modest 5.5% that Bitcoin's showing. I consider that to be a little bit of a caution sign. Usually Bitcoin kind of leads, and then those profits get redistributed into a lot of these altcoins. But right now, it's kind of altcoins leading the way and Bitcoin just steadily creeping up. But as long as everything's going up, we're okay. You can see the overall market cap's only up about 3.7%, though, and the volume is up over 78% compared to the week prior.
Yep. Do you think that tariff has to do something with this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The latest news was a specific tariff on Brazil of 50%. That didn't really move the needle too much. But what did was tariffs getting paused between China and the EU until August. So Trump pushed that back, said we're not touching that until August. And I think the extra 3 weeks that people now have to breathe probably created a little more comfort to at least create some mini pumps uh, while the US president kicks the rock down the road, if you will.
Yep. Understand. Um, Last week there was a whale, a very large whale who transacted a large amount of Bitcoin. Yeah, I think hitting almost $9 billion in profits.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely some news of that whale. I've been tracking kind of just the overall whale picture. Specifically, we like to check out what's going on with holders that have between 10 to 10,000 BTC. And as I update to the current day, you can see it's actually started to look pretty good. This is where we left off last week on July 2nd. And since that time, those wallets have accumulated a combined 16,305 Bitcoin or so. So they're continuing to move in the right direction and they're supporting this price rise. Regardless of what that one whale does, I highly recommend kind of looking at it as a collective group because these are really the wallets that specifically move markets the most. You can see when they dump, prices tend to drop. This was when we started to have the tariff announcements. And then around mid-June, right here, this is when we had the airstrikes between the US and Iran. But the whales and sharks were not slowing down this time. They were a little bit during the tariffs. But clearly, I mean, if you just go back to about 6 weeks ago until now, they've added about 95,000 BTC during that time, and the price of Bitcoin's gone up a modest 6.5% during that time.
Right. Seems like the whales are still very confident with the future of Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah, when the key stakeholders are feeling good and they're continuing to stay bullish themselves and they want to accumulate more, their capital generally will help to drive markets up further. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Do you think the ETFs have a hand in this as well?
Yeah, great question. Let me pull up the ETF dashboard, which I have on a spare tab. Here we go. So we're going to pull this up, hit the refresh button, give it just a few seconds. And here's where we're at with the ETF flows. There's only been one outflow day, and this was technically July 1st, not June 30th, despite the label. These dates are one day behind. But you can see all the way back since June 9th, just about 5 weeks ago, we've had nothing but inflows outside of this one day to kick off July. So there's been like a collective $3 to $3.5 billion of inflows during this time. And this undoubtedly is a secondary way of looking at what the large institutional wallets out there are doing at any given time, beyond just what we checked out on this chart with the on-chain whales. You know, we have some clear signs that institutional, other large capital traders that maybe don't want to be exposed directly to crypto, they're putting in more and more money betting on crypto's long-term future as well. So yeah, absolutely, this has an impact.
Yeah. What does the MV overview of the Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to show next here. So going to the current day, you can see the spike right here on the right side for both long-term and short-term. It got up as high as plus 24% for long-term average wallets. So that's taking all of the wallets that have been active in the past year and getting an idea of their average profits. Plus 24% is quite high. Highest it's been since early June when we did see that top around 110K and then we corrected. So yeah, it's a little bit risky right now from a long-term perspective. And from a short-term perspective, those wallets that have been active in the past 30 days, their average returns got up to about plus 8%. So that's not an extreme danger territory. But if you look at where this orange line got to, it hasn't been that high since the all-time high that happened back on May 22nd, that previous all-time high, I should say. So a couple slight warning signs here. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to drop back down, but generally, when you see both the long and short term average wallets way up here, well above the average of 0%, it's a sign that we might flatten out for a little while as the FOMOers, try to pile in money, expecting us to go to 120K and beyond right away, which could happen. But oftentimes they'll buy in, the whales will take a breather, take a little bit of profit, and then the price will kind of just coast and be flat for a while or have some mild retraces just to scare away all of the people who are FOMOing in right now.
That makes sense. The crypto whales will be kind of holding the price after the initial pump. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see the RSI too here at plus 71. That's the highest we've seen since the previous all-time high as well. So for the TA traders who use the MACD or RSI, they're showing a few warning signs as well. We don't have MACD on this chart, but RSI I do think is a pretty valuable indicator. And obviously anything above 50 means we're a bit overheated, especially if you get over 75, which we're very close to right now. That would be a sign that there's some overvaluation going on in terms of the amount of retail traders that are profiting or trying to buy in and get more Bitcoin right now. You don't see a lot of people buying Bitcoin when we're dropping like we were here during the US-Iran conflict that was temporarily going on here. But all of a sudden, not everyone, but many people are trying to get in here now that we've risen up to a new all-time high. It's just the nature of crypto and the emotions behind it.
So there's still some FOMO going on.
Yeah, more than we've seen in a while, and understandably, because all-time highs, especially round numbers like 115K, when they're breached, people start to get excited once again after so much time kind of being bored. I think a lot of people were actually kind of just showing impatience, and we actually posted about that. I'll come back to this XRP post, but check this out. This was yesterday. This was when they just barely passed that 112K all-time high. And you can see there's been several moments over the past 3 months where the amount of holders has been going down. And whenever the amount of holders go down, that's usually because of retailers. Retailers make up, 85, 90%, at least while it's smaller than about 0.1, 0.3 Bitcoin or so, 90% of the wallets that have coins in them are those small sized wallets. So when this overall line of non-empty wallets starts to go down, prices generally go up, especially if it's like a sustained decline. You can see what happened back here in early May. You can see it happened again temporarily in mid-June. We had a mini rally right here that coincided with this. Then we had another drop here in late June and another big green candle that went on roughly 5-ish days or so. And then this final one that happened starting on July 6th or so, we started to see a decline in these wallets. And all of a sudden, what do you know? We have a breakout and a new all-time high. So every time the small traders that make up the vast majority of the crowd and the vocal people on social media, whenever they get impatient, whenever they get fearful because of some world event, generally, it's kind of a sell the rumor, buy the news situation, right? Even the Iran and US airstrikes from 3-ish weeks ago, that ended up being a very short-lived crisis that did not really impact crypto for much more than a couple of days. And every time they shrunk or dropped out and liquidated their wallets out of fear, prices ended up kind of making them regret that.
Wow. Seems like Bitcoin is getting more resilient towards world events and global news. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, It's hard to say. I actually think that crypto is more correlated with world events because it's more correlated with the stock market and equities in general, no matter what. It's not just the S&P 500, but Asian stock markets as well. Crypto kind of is going more and more in sync with those because there's more institutional traders who want exposure to both, NVIDIA or Apple and Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, right? So you have all these large capital traders who now take crypto very seriously when they weren't taking it seriously 5 to 10 years ago, or at least less institutional traders were back then. So now when there's world news, you tend to see crypto go the same direction as the S&P 500. We have a template where you can actually compare Bitcoin's price with the S&P 500 and gold. And you can see, especially, right here, this was when the tariffs happened and everything kind of went down together. And then if I just hide gold for a moment, and I'll hide the funding rate too, we don't need that. Look at how correlated Bitcoin and the S&P 500 have been. Of course, they're on their own axis. So this kind of run is bigger for Bitcoin than it is for the S&P because Bitcoin is more volatile. But relative to their own normal fluctuations, they've gone pretty much hand in hand together with very few exceptions. Even like this flat part here, I remember this was June 21st. I'm checking my calendar. I know that airstrike news started on a Sunday. Yeah, so the 21st and 22nd is when the airstrikes happened. And guess what? The S&P 500 isn't open on Saturday and Sunday, but crypto is. So crypto took a big drop. The S&P 500 didn't. And by Monday, there was already news of a truce being planned or like partially executed. I don't want to say the exact date unless I can remember correctly, and I don't. But it was either like by the 24th or 25th, it was all resolved. So the S&P 500 never even saw that dip. And then Bitcoin just played catch up because it dropped over that previous weekend and then caught up to what the S&P 500 did. So some are even using this as an indicator. Whichever one is dropping below, they're the one that's more undervalued. And people will move their money out of stocks and into crypto. Or if crypto starts to lead like this, they'll move money out of crypto, which this was the all-time high for Bitcoin at 112K back then. Started buying more into the S&P and got rewarded. So it's really interesting to see how tightly correlated they are. Now, historically, the biggest bull runs in crypto have happened when there is zero correlation between the S&P 500 and Bitcoin. But we really haven't seen zero correlation since 2020, 2021. By 2022, there was all those interest rate hikes, if you remember. And that's what caused that big bear market. And a lot of institutionals started to really get exposure to both crypto and S&P 500 on those big dips that happened back then. And it's really been a lot more correlated than we used to see between the two ever since about 3 years ago.
Wow, these are all more and more institution coming into play that helps to correlate both S&P and Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, we have probable evidence of that. With crypto being anonymous, you can only say with so much confidence. But I like to look at the number of addresses that hold, let's say, over 100 Bitcoin. So just check this out. So these are wallets that hold at least $10 million, or now about 1.1 or $11.5 million or more, because that's the price of Bitcoin these days. But you can see how much the amount of 100 or more BTC wallets have grown over time, compared to, like, let's say, I mean, the small ones are always growing because they're much easier to create. But even here, like, you can see how there started to be a little bit of flatlining about 3 weeks ago. There really hasn't been much growth between the retail traders, but there was a lot of growth between the institutionals relatively. So to me, that's a great sign when you're seeing the institutionals really start to grow in number, while the amount of small holders is actually dropping off.
Wow, that's pretty great since institutions are in it to support the price.
Yeah, I'm just checking this one too here. So, whoops. If I just look at the amount of 10 or more BTC wallets and we compare that to the price, you'll see a little bit of correlation. There's probably better signals out there. This is more of a long-term analysis. Where did I put it? Oh, it's at the very bottom. Excuse me. Down here. So the green line, I'll make it easier. Just change that to a candle. So you can see the long stretch here where they were actually shrinking. This was after Trump was elected, and there was this big downfall. People were unsure of what to make of it. And then they actually started to really accumulate after this last all-time high that happened in mid-May, and they haven't stopped ever since. So they've just grown and grown and grown in number ever since that last retrace started from the all-time high. So the big test will be, will they start to shrink again now that we've seen a new all-time high? Because there's 908 more wallets that have at least 10 Bitcoin compared to roughly 6 weeks ago. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this, with key stakeholders and their influence on the price.
That's pretty great news, actually.
Yeah. So I think literally the next 3 to 5 days of crypto, I think, are going to be crucial. And I want to get into Ethereum and XRP key stakeholders as well. But before I do, I just wanted to mention, let's see. We're going to change this to Bitcoin. I was previously looking at Solana actually to see how the sentiment was shifting there. But for time, we're just going to look at Bitcoin right now. And generally, there we go. You just go to the last week, make it easier. Generally, you want to see a lot of blue here. When blue is exceeding red, that's a sign that the crowd is getting very bearish. If red is exceeding blue, that's a sign that they're starting to get very bullish. And you can see there was a lot of bearishness here on July 9th and 10th. And then all of a sudden, this rally begins and we see more red, more bullish, and calls for higher or above in relation to Bitcoin or BTC. That was a sign that we started to get a lot of FOMO trickling in. So I'll be watching each of these 4-hour candles as they progress the next couple of days, even going into the weekend, and seeing if the FOMO really starts to pop out. And we can also look at it just from a raw commentary perspective, where we can see the overall ratio of bullish versus bearish comments. And right about here, we started to get a lot of bullish comments. Call right about here, this line is about average. Anything below that's a little more bearish than usual. Anything above this is more bullish than usual. And we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 straight days now of a slight bullish bias.
Yeah. Seems like Bitcoin is having a good time. What about Ethereum, though?
Yeah, let's toggle over to Ethereum while we're on the same chart and see the difference. We should see some pretty big bullishness, which we do, because Ethereum's actually been outpacing Bitcoin quietly. It's up about 6.2% right now, just in the past 24 hours. And you can see when it really started to erupt on July 8th and 9th, that's when you started to get this big bullish spike once again. And even just compare like what happened on the right of this line right before this big rally and to the left of this line. There was kind of a modest ratio of 1 to 1.5 bullish comments for every bearish comment. And all of a sudden it's more like 2 to 3 bullish comments, or even 3.5 bullish comments for every one bearish comment. So there's been a significant difference after early May, just about 2 months ago, compared to before May, when we were dropping and everyone was kind of laughing and making fun of Ethereum because it was falling behind Bitcoin and so many other large cap assets. So big bullish momentum and sentiment for the number 2 market cap asset, even more so than Bitcoin, it seems, compared to how it used to be.
It seems like Ethereum is ready to pop.
Well, I guess the question is, has it already? It's nearing $3,000 now, which would be the first time it's reached that market value since way back during the first few days of February. So a little over 5 months ago is the last time we got there. I guess the question is, does the crowd believe it's going to pop in a good way? Pop being a positive description in this case. Or does the crowd still kind of doubt it a little bit? This tells me they're kind of privy to Ethereum right now, and there's a lot of people loading up on it, which might slow down the rally a little bit. As long as Bitcoin keeps going, Ethereum can still benefit. But as far as Ethereum gaining on Bitcoin, it's usually going to do its best work in that regard if there isn't so much bullish narrative going on. And right now there is a lot of bullish narrative. So just be a little bit cautious of the fact that Ethereum's been on one hell of a run here. And we could even see that MVRV has really turned a corner for Ethereum.
Wow.
So look at that. They got all the way up to plus 15% now for long-term. I'm sorry, for 30-day traders. That's the highest it's been since mid-May. And for long-term, it's up at plus 12% now. So both are now in the risky zone, as opposed to here when they were in the opportunity zone. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean we can't keep going, but the higher this MVRV goes, the more risk it's suggesting that you may want to be a little careful, take a little profit, maybe take out your profit just so that anything you lose is part of, an original investment. You've got that profit closed off, but not investment advice. Everyone has their own strategies. If you're in this for a 5-year run, then these little swings don't make as much of a difference.
Yep. But are the big players in Ethereum collecting Ethereum over the period of, I think, 2 months? Because since there is a pretty dead price action.
Yeah, I mean, Ethereum is always a bit of a tricky one to analyze because you've got so much DeFi and staking wallets that are being created every day. It has by far the most total wallets of any coin in crypto, by the way. It now has a little over 151.54 million wallets, as opposed to Bitcoin being in the low 50 millions. So it's almost triple the amount of wallets compared to Bitcoin. So there's a lot of noise when it comes to using Ethereum supply distribution as a signal. I still like to look at a few things like 10,000 or more ETH, and seeing what the overall amount is that they hold in terms of the rough supply. Just take off everything else here. Make this a brighter color. Yeah, so they're actually, especially right here, they flattened out and then started accumulating once again, and they hold 75.74% of all Ethereum. That's the highest we've seen. This is going all the way back in time to when Ethereum started. It's the highest ratio since May of 2017. This actually may be a good one to share with the audience. So I may
Yeah.
put a short article together about this soon. But yeah,
Yep.
they hold a little over 3/4 of the entire supply right now, which should be considered a good sign. There's a lot less staking wallets and DeFi wallets when you're talking about 10,000 ETH or more.
Yep. Yep. That's good. Um, I guess for all altcoins, they are just gonna follow Bitcoin in this current state. Yeah, when Bitcoin have already hit all-time highs, like Litecoin, Solana.
Yeah, it probably depends on the sector a little bit. If we start to see meme coins breaking out a little, that could be a sign that the entire crypto market cap is being threatened to see a top, because meme coin surges are like the last stage of any rally. See if I can open the watch lists here, which are accurate. Sometimes the uh, loading process is a little funky with this page, and I know our great developers are working on this. Give it one more try. There we go. So here's the percentage gains and losses by sector. Top price performers, AI and big data is doing pretty well. They're up a little over 10% in the last week. All assets, 3.8%. DeSci is up 12.5%. And then look at meme coins, 16.9% gain. So they're actually the best performing sector among the ones that we've mapped out here on our public watch lists. We also see liquid staking doing really well, NFTs doing nicely. Layer ones, obviously Bitcoin has a lot to do with this one. Solana is not doing as well. So assets that are involved in the Solana ecosystem are the ones that seem to be falling behind at the moment. But yeah, when you talk about altcoins, obviously you're talking about every other asset out there besides Bitcoin. Some like to refer to Ethereum as a non-altcoin. It's up for debate. But regardless, when you're talking about tens of thousands of different coins that are in existence, it's tough to classify them all. I recommend kind of following the sectors a little bit to see which ones might be showing some breakout potential, which ones might be lagging behind, things like that.
Makes sense.
And I know we wanted to talk about XRP for a moment as well. I posted yesterday about them, and they're doing pretty well. They're not surging quite the way that Ethereum is, but they're about on par with what Bitcoin's doing the last few days. In fact, I can check right here what their percentage is over the last week. Yeah, XRP's, they're definitely doing better than Bitcoin, not quite as good as Ethereum. They're up about 11.5% in the past week. So I posted this yesterday as they crossed above 239. Now they're closer to 250. There's 2,743 wallets holding a million or more XRP, which is the highest of all time. There's also 47.32 billion coins held by wallets holding at least a million XRP. So they're moving up, as well as the number of wallets moving up. That's a good sign if I'm an XRP holder in terms of the number 4 market cap assets long-term future.
So XRP holders out there will be celebrating.
Yeah, I mean, many of them already are pretty thrilled after a plus 11.5% week. But, like I say, with every altcoin out there, it's all going to be dependent on Bitcoin keeping its momentum. Will it move toward 120K or even 130 the rest of July? Or will it start to retreat a bit back to 100 because the crowd got a bit too excited and greedy?
All right. I think that about cover the topics that I would love to get into.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to at least show what some of the top topics are that the crowd is interested. It won't surprise you to see that all-time high and Bitcoin are the top 2 subjects in crypto. And this is weighted against their normal rate of all-time high in Bitcoin. So the fact that they're number 1 and 2 means there's a significant increase in discussion compared to normal. You can see 116K being a very big topic right now. Ethereum here at number 6 is interesting. Grok, because Musk is launching his Grok 4. That's number 7. You can still see some of the previous round numbers, 112, 113K. It's very Bitcoin themed on the top social trends right now, as you would probably expect.
What about stable coins? Since Genius Act was already in place, and stable coins will because Genius Act is all about stable coins. Will stable coins have any sort of impact?
Yeah, let's check and just see if there's been any crazy anomalies with Tether. Because I know that was very recently approved, right?
Yes.
So if we go to some of the key indicators for Tether, even though its price stays stable roughly at $1, it doesn't mean that there's not strange anomalies happening on the network all the time. We're specifically looking at the Tether on Ethereum, by the way, for those wondering. So we're not including some of the other Tethers out there, which include Polygon, Avalanche, Arbitrum, Optimism, Binance Coin, Solana, and even some Chainkey USDT. This is specifically for the Ethereum-based and most popular Tether out there. So right now, network growth kind of started to drop. It's not really showing anything too special in terms of overall utilization. Hasn't been quite an increase the way you may expect. We did get some big whale transactions. So this is interesting. If we just look at 1 million or more dollar transactions, there was a huge jump of 2,441 yesterday. That was the highest spike we saw since February, indicating that there's been some major increased interest in using Tether, likely due to Bitcoin's initial all-time high yesterday, and obviously it's continuing to rise now. But I'd pay attention to the fact that there's been a big jump in Tether usage at the moment. I would also suggest paying attention to, while it's holding at least $100,000 in Tether, so whales and sharks. I'll hide everything else here for a moment. And I'll just make it yellow. They've been dropping pretty consistently. They still hold the vast majority, but 94.5%, or about 95%, excuse me, are still held by 100K or more Tether wallets, but it has been dropping a bit throughout the year.
Wow, that's a really huge supply held by that group.
Yeah. And if we look at USD coin for comparison on Ethereum also, not too much special going on chain. We did see a big circulation spike that was the highest since mid-May, and that was 2 days ago. And if we go down to 100K or more, yeah, kind of the same thing. It's been dropping significantly since late April.
All right. Good. I just had one more question. Yeah.
Please.
Do you think alt seasons are already here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we can refer back to the screener here, and we do see the vast majority of assets among the top 70 or so that we're looking at are gaining faster than Bitcoin. So one could argue as soon as that happens, it's pretty much a confirmation that we are at least in the midst of an alt season. I think most people ask that question because they actually want to know whether alt season is going to continue.
Yep.
And that's a tough one. I think it's ultimately going to depend on greed. I'm a little worried when we looked at the watch lists that meme coins are the biggest gainers over the past week in terms of sectors. We also have a nice template here where we can look at the discussion rate between layer ones, layer twos, and meme coins. And you can see right now, all of the spotlight is on layer ones because of Bitcoin's all-time high. Social dominance, on the other hand, for meme coins kind of had its big high about 5 days ago and has kind of dropped back down to normal for now. So that's not a bad sign. When you see something like this, that's a clear sign that people are getting a little too greedy. But I don't see, with the amount of retracing that happened throughout the first half of 2025, I don't see altcoins stopping their trend upwards as long as Bitcoin can maintain, at least that 110K support level, roughly. I know there's TA traders that would be a little more precise with their numbers, but to me, that's kind of a big psychological support level right now, where as long as Bitcoin maintains that price, retail and even institutions together will feel comfortable enough with redistributing some of these profits we've seen the last couple of days into other altcoins. So that's the big price point I would recommend watching, as well as just the overall greed levels for Bitcoin, as well as, even like Dogecoin or something like that. If we looked at meme coins specifically to see which ones are on gaining the most, like Nero, Peanut the Squirrel. I love some of these names. So if we look at the overall sentiment for those assets really quick. I think I know there's two of them. First Nero on Ethereum is the larger one. Yeah, there's not even much discussion about it. Maybe it's the other, just to check. Nero Ethereum. Yeah, they're going to be the same because it's any mention of Nero. But the other one, Peanut, let's see what's going on with the sentiment there. Yeah, not much talk about it at all, actually. So that's a good sign. The fact that there's literally just zero discussion about Peanut on a daily basis. If we look at the top meme coin like Doge, yeah, there's been a bit of an increase in sentiment. You can see the high jumps in positive comments versus negative comments. It is up about 8.5% in the past 24 hours. So Doge specifically can be a good reflection of sentiment in general and how much people are leaning bullish and versus bearish. It's not crazy scary, but it's starting to creep up. So if you are heavily into altcoins, you're going to want to root for traders to start to sink back here with not a lot of bullish commentary across social media, indicating retail is selling their meme coins. Therefore, yours can continue to pump as institutionals grab a hold of those retail sells and they pump up the price more. So,
Right.
yeah, that's my rough take about Altseason. It's always a tricky subject because it's so dependent on Bitcoin, but as of now, things look pretty nice now that we've got a new all-time high. There's likely at least going to be some temporary profit redistributions, assuming there's not something cataclysmic that happens with Trump tariffs or something, between Ukraine, Russia, Iran, US, Palestine, Israel, stuff like that. I think that we could at least go into Friday and the weekend with some good momentum. So plan on bracing yourself for Monday, most likely. That's when we'll really see the test as to whether crypto can maintain the momentum that it's been enjoying this week.
All right. I think that's a lot of information for the people that's watching this. So maybe over the weekend will be a good time to digest.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully this info is interesting. Anyone who wants to get a hold of this data, just go to the Santiment pricing page, app.santiment.net/pricing. Get free 2 weeks to explore everything that I just showed with all the data in real time. If you're on a free account, you get a 30-day lag on all of the data, which is not as useful, obviously. So just my advice, use code Equities Tracker. We've had it for many years now, and you get 25% off of your subscription for any amount of months or years you want to sign up.
All right. I think that would be all. So thank you, Brian, for coming on. I think that's a really fruitful session, especially for me.
Thanks, Nicholas. Always a pleasure speaking with you. And I look forward to speaking next month with either you or Andy or both of you. And have a good weekend in the meantime.
You too. Enjoy your weekend. See you, Brian.
See you later. Cheers.
Cheers.